Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the final session of ICDM's PowerTalk series for the year. Today's session, Boardroom Insights 2025, Navigating Governance, Risk, and Strategic Foresight, will delve into pivotal issues shaping the governance landscape in 2025. Leading today's session is Saket Bhatia, a renowned expert in forensic investigations and compliance. He will be joined by a distinguished panel of industry leaders to provide actionable insights on governance, risk management, and the role of emerging technologies. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nisa, and I'm delighted to be your MC for this program. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few housekeeping notes to observe. You may raise your questions during Q&A session at the end of the program. Kindly raise your hand to do so. Slido, an audience engagement platform, will be used to get feedback from participants on related questions from each module. Please have your mobile phone ready to scan the QR code on the screen. The restrooms are located outside the ICDM office, Jansen on the left and ladies on the right as you exit the main entrance. In case of emergency, please use the emergency exit doors outside of the hall area. Please follow the instructions given by the ICDM team. The fire evacuation plans are at all exits, and ICDM have internal fire marshals to assist if anything. And last but not least, at the end of today's program, we will share a QR code for your feedback, and the CE certificate will be available after the program. Ladies and gentlemen, today's session will provide a critical insight into governance, risk management, and strategic foresight, empowering directors to navigate emerging regulatory changes, ESG mandates, and technological advancements. By the end of this session, we hope participants will gain practical strategies to enhance governance frameworks, anticipate future challenges, and lead with agility and ethical integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to briefly introduce our speaker for today. Saket Bhatia is Managing Director in Forensic Investigations and Intelligence based in Singapore with over 22 years of experience. He specializes in assisting Asian boards and audit committees in addressing financial fraud, asset misappropriation, bribery, regulatory non-compliance, and ethics violations. In Malaysia, he has conducted proactive assessment to enhance corporate ethics and governance framework, and is adept at fraud risk assessment, data analytics, and improvement compliance systems. Without further delay, please welcome Saket Bhatia.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you, Michelle and ICDM for opening doors and letting me speak here. It's always nice. We were contemplating whether we should do an event on the 17th December or not, because we were just saying, looks like it's a Christmas mood already. Everyone is so chatty, and we don't want to talk about the sad things about compliance and so on, right? We can just make this into a cocktail session as well. Michelle was just saying she is sponsoring that. But no, thank you so much. Just a quick introduction. First of all, just to get the name right, this is Saket with an E, not an I. So it's Saket. Yes. For all those who don't know, Kroll is a global consulting firm. We are 6,500 people globally. We are specialists in few of the things that we do, including investigation, diligence, and compliance that I'm part of. I have glad to say that over the last year, we have made progress in Malaysia. We have a team here. Our valuation practice is here. my colleagues from the valuation team. Michael, I just saw you. Oh, yes, they are there as well. We are setting up a team for our investigation practice also in Malaysia. So fairly good progress, and thank you everyone for all the support. Um, like Nisa said, I lead the practice for financial fraud investigation. I work quite a bit with corporates, quite a bit with boards, both on board directors, independent directors, both on the preventive side of compliance governance, on how to make sure companies have good governance system, processes, they are compliant. And second is the investigative side. When things go wrong, you need someone to do the investigation. You need to find out who the bad guys are, right? So we end up doing both sides of things, primarily with the boards. And we thought of coming today here, and I have a fantastic set of panel coming up subsequently. But I thought it will be good to just summarize in terms of what we have seen in 2024 when it comes to governance, regulation, and compliance. And I will provide more of the global view, and then obviously a panelist will provide more of the local view. But I'll just provide in terms of globally what we are seeing, what are the areas, and what is that you as directors on the board you need to be aware of and look out for your companies, the one that you are on the board or one that you advise. So that is our plan for at least my plan for the next half an hour, and then we'll have a fantastic panel coming up. Please feel free to just raise your hand and stop us. Even during the panel, we'll not wait for the panel to get over. So if you have any questions, any point of view, let's do it. Let's deal with it that time itself, rather than wait for the session to get over. Does it work for everyone? Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's look at broadly what are the 3-4 major things that happened in 2024, right? And I think so the key thing was sanctions. What we used to talk about in the global terms, FCPA, people started calling about sanction is the next FCPA, right? And obviously from 2023, 2024, after the Russia-Ukraine war, the eye on sanction became very, very high. It's not easy, so there has been lot of fines that has been imposed by regulators, by OFAC and so on various companies globally for not having good framework around sanction prevention and so on. And we probably see this going forward as well, that further going to increase. Now, what are some of the reasons why there has been so much noise around sanctions, right? And it's not easy, right? So if your companies also need to, obviously follow sanction regime, and if you are importing, exporting from sanctioned countries, or even if there are some connections to these countries, it is not easy to have a good compliance or sanctions program. And the reason being, first of all, sanctions is very dynamic, right? And people who want to avoid sanctions, they do quite a bit of things to make sure they are not getting caught. We have heard of, layering, how companies are being created, how shell companies are created, how their nominees directors created. A lot of jurisdiction companies are based where you don't get to know the names of the shareholder directors, right? The ultimate UBOs, the ultimate beneficial owners, that name is not known. It is a moving regime as well, right, in terms of how new companies and new individuals are added every day globally on the watch list. So again, it's a very difficult program. It's not very easy that you have this, you need to abide by this, and you do this. So sanction is going to be a challenge, and we believe that is going to be more challenge going forward as we progress in the next years to come. Yeah. This just talks about based on a survey where it said that primarily the enforcement action, most people felt that the enforcement actions, the fines around sanctions will increase going forward. And financial institutions specifically, right? They handle several thousands and millions of customers and so on. They will have no option but to cooperate. They have been already cooperating, but their cooperation levels with regulators are going to increase. That primarily, what does it all mean? What is that I'm saying from the last 5 minutes? So it primarily means the expectations of boards is going to increase to how to have a good sanction AML program in your respective organizations. I think so ultimately because the fines or the repercussions of not having a good sanction program is far more. Um, Companies have become smart. We heard about greenwashing. Now we hear about Southeast Asia washing or Malaysia washing or Singapore washing. In fact, last week I think so there was where uh, the government here clearly said Chinese company not to use Malaysia as a way to avoid US sanctions. And we have seen this happening, right? A lot of Chinese companies to avoid the US sanctions. A lot of Russian companies are just creating subsidiaries in Malaysia, Singapore, and start doing this, right? And ultimately it will affect the country's relationship as well. So again, how do you ensure that this is not happening? And when we talk about sanction, right, what is a company, which is a company, because every company today has become global, right? You might be headquartered, you might be in, say, Singapore, you might have originated from China, you might have global operations, your biggest customer could be in the US. How do you identify where you are from? Which is the country you belong to? Technically, is it just the headquartered, or is it where the customer is, or is it where your data center is? What? Very, very, very difficult, and that's why you have lawyers here who can assist you. But yeah, it's just the sanction has kept everyone occupied quite a bit last year. The second area is general increase in frauds, both in the corporate, in the startup space. I think so overall the number of frauds that we have seen has quite increased. Here this statistic says that, you know, EMEA and APAC in particular, the number of frauds have quite increased to 73% as compared to other regions. And more importantly, if you look at here, the payment fraud, right? I think so that is the amount of fraud, that is the area where companies and individuals are losing quite a bit, right? So the payment related frauds where people are losing their money, someone is taking control of your account. Those are more on an individual basis, on a company basis, but that type of fraud is increasing. The type of fraud that we see in corporates when we investigate, I think so there are 3 or 4 areas that we have seen an increase. One is conflict of interest. So, you know, we have seen a lot of issues around conflict of interest, and these might not be direct conflict of interest, right? It's not necessarily that my spouse is working in a vendor, for example, organization, but conflict of interest is slightly more, I would say, it's not very transparent. So it could be, again, like the sanction, it could be layered. So conflict of interest is something which has, at least in Southeast Asia, I've seen many cases emerging for conflict of interest. So just be aware. We have seen a rise in workplace harassment type of cases. So it could be bullying, it could be, having, so when I say workplace harassment, it could be bullying, it could be sexual harassment in nature, it could be having a bias towards someone. So those type of investigations are increasing because now people are getting more vocal. They are using the hotline channels, the whistleblowing channels quite a bit, and actually raising this to the audit committee. They are raising it to the independent investigations team and so on. In some cases, they are reaching out directly to the regulators as well. So what is happening today, everyone has access to every regulator's email. And when someone is raising a complaint, we have seen that they are, also ceasing the regulators. So it is not that the information or the allegation just with you, but suddenly it's out there. And then again, as companies, as board of directors or as investigators, it becomes more challenging in terms of, how do we address that. So that type of issue. Third is, at least in Southeast Asia or generally in Asia, the bribery and corruption issues continue. Again, we keep talking about even Transparency International, which some of you know, right? It's the global organization which benchmarks country. If you see, the standards have really not improved in Asia, or specifically in Southeast Asia, right? So bribery and corruption issues continue for companies which operate in Southeast Asia or the larger part of Asia. Why Southeast Asia? So I think so those are the 3 things that we have continued to see in terms of corporate issues, governance issues in Asia and Southeast Asia particularly. 2024 again has been the year of fines, I would say. TD Bank specifically was fined $3 billion. $3 billion because they, again, this was linked to AML sanctions. The bank, the Canadian bank, which did not follow good governance standards, good AML, framework, and they were fined $3 billion. This data was actually till October. The last 3 months are not included. So TD Bank was a large fine. Cummins was fined $2 million, primarily because the US government found out that Cummins created a software which basically helped in saying that their cars were compliant from emission standard perspective. So if you are supposed to have X standard for emission, that your vehicles are not polluting, Cummins actually created a software which basically reduced that, so that cars could pass the emission test. And this was a global thing that Cummins was fined for. Apple was fined again $2 billion for anti-competitive behavior. So that is one another area, I think. So anti-competitive, antitrust is again becoming quite common, and we know that there are some changes which has happened in Malaysia as well. We'll talk about that in the panel, but that's another area. So Apple was fined again $2 billion because the regulator said that Apple did not provide a common platform for all the app developers to actually go and list their products. And this was primarily to do with the music thing. It started with Spotify actually alleging this, but $2 billion. Meta was fined $1.2 billion also on GDPR. So that was one of the largest GDPR fines. I'm sure everyone knows about GDPR. Yeah, so GDPR, Apple was fined, I think, so last couple of months back, $1.2 billion was the largest GDPR fine. That was how they were storing data in the US versus Europe. So again, the type of fines that we have seen, again, are quite large. We had SAP getting fined. If I remember right, it was $235 million or something, SAP getting fined because they were identified bribing officials to win contracts in Indonesia, in some part in Middle East, and so on. So again, these are all 24 numbers, but quite interesting type of fines which has come in. Out of the 8 billion that is mentioned here, 4 billion came from, I don't know how many of you deal in crypto and how many of you actually invested in Terra. Luna, anyone invested Luna? I was one of them, yeah. So the regulator got 4 billion, nothing came to us as customers. So, but that was out of the 8 billion, 4 billion was about the Terra, the Luna cryptocurrency fine, which they took from Terraforms. Cyber, again, I was going through my previous presentations. I think so in 2022 I did a presentation in ICDM, and I did mention that cyber is going to continue. And I did mention that any of your kids are planning to take up any further studies, I think so this is the right area. So I still continue say that if your kids are looking for career, the most easiest and promising job probably could be cyber related, at least in the next 10 years. I can't talk about, because the demand for cyber professionals is really short globally, and the number of frauds which are happening, and we'll talk about this further, but rise of Gen AI, all that is just going to increase cyber frauds much more. Last week, Gemini introduced a new chip, if you are following technology, which is called the Willow chip. It was a breakthrough, and they said that this chip can do something which the supercomputers, existing supercomputers, if they have to do, they will take 1 trillion years to do this, and this chip can do it in 5 minutes. So it's fascinating, just read about it. It's the Willow chip by Gemini. And primarily why I'm saying this, because if this is actually launched, all the encryption that we have on our phones, even someone is saying Bitcoin as a crypto platform, right? What is Bitcoin? Primarily we are saying that this encrypted, no one can hack into it. But now they're saying if this chip is used, it can be hacked in 5 minutes. So what will happen to Bitcoin, for example, right? So again, I'm saying it is still in the works, But going forward, cyber and cyber-related frauds are going to increase further. And as you see in terms of fines, in terms of losses, these are in trillion dollars. The graph that you see are in trillion dollars, by the way. So 24, it was $9 trillion as per some survey that was done. So cyber continues to be quite scary, I would say. Not interesting, but quite scary in terms of losses in terms of cyber. So what 2025, right? If you have to look at again, what are the 3-4 areas I believe that could be of interest in 2025. I think so. Entire thing around linked to sanctions, right? I think so. There'll be a lot of focus on counter terrorism, AML, and so on. Governments will or regulators will ask governments to increase their processes around identification of the ultimate UBOs that I said. It's very opaque currently. We don't know in many jurisdictions. You don't know who the shareholder, who is the director, and so on. Obviously, because of evolving sanctions and because of geopolitical tensions, which will continue to emerge, I think so. Again, having a good program becomes more challenging. So again, how the sanctions program or the AML program will change over the years, I think so, will be interesting. There'll be a lot of focus. Again, Bitcoin is at an all-time high, I think so. Again, people are talking about cryptocurrency quite a bit. Again, things like NFT have come back in the discussions, which was not there in the last. In 24, no one talked about NFT. I think 22, everyone talked about NFT. That was the next big thing that was supposed to happen. But I now hear that again, things like the digital art has come back in the picture. So again, and again, crypto, right? A lot of companies have started investing in crypto. That again means that, how do you know that who is the person, who is the customer, how you're dealing with it. The entire EML thing around crypto is going to be important. And regulators are expecting companies, especially financial companies, right, to adopt more of tech on your sanction and AML. It cannot be just done manually. A lot of companies are still doing it very manually. So you have to adopt tech going forward for AML trends. How does tech obviously help? It automates the entire process. So again, it's not disjointed. It automates the entire process. Everything is put in one place. You do real-time sanctions, almost real-time sanctions, real-time monitoring of the sanction risk that you're talking about. You can integrate this, just not, a lot of companies do onboarding, KYC at one point, one team is doing, and then transaction monitoring is being done by a different team and so on. So tomorrow, if you use tech platforms, which is what the expectations is, you will be able to integrate a lot of things that you do in your companies, especially financial services, right? I think so you can do it together in one place. ESG, I think so. A lot of people in this room who deal with ESG, but the expectations of companies to do ESG will increase. A lot of companies, lot of countries are looking, have already put in the ESG governance programs in place. A lot of them are now reaching the deadlines in terms of when they have to report. So the sustainability reporting deadlines are coming up in many countries. So again, ESG is going to be always important. I was doing a research and I was told that there is a shortage of ESG related funds today, in terms of there is money, but there are not enough ESG funds. So again, funds have to look, do more focus on ESG, and companies need to do more focus on what they're doing on ESG, and more importantly, on the reporting side of ESG. A lot of companies are doing it, but having a common platform to report, what is that you're reporting, what is that you're required to do from a governance perspective is not standardized, and hopefully that will get better as things progresses in 25 and beyond. This is again not an area everyone talks about, but digital concentration risk, right? What is digital concentration? Digital concentration primarily for me means that if a lot of companies are relying on one service provider, and these could be your payment systems, these could be your Visa Masters, these could be your Microsoft, these could be your Google. So a lot of emphasis is on one service provider, one system. And what happens when we had the CrowdStrike thing where Microsoft was down and billions of dollars were lost, and a lot of operations came down, airlines could not take off, and so on. So again, why I'm saying is, as board, you should just, earlier we used to talk about business continuity, remember? I think so. And that time it was more about physical security, right? What happens if the building is flooded? But now what I'm saying is you need to start thinking of that your companies might be using these global companies for various things. What happens if something like that, if one of them goes down? How does that impact your operations? It might be very, very remote, but if you actually look at it, it's not actually very remote. There are every year 4, 5, 10 cases that happens. Obviously, CrowdStrike, we hear much more about it, but there are such companies. Another one was SolarWinds. They were a software service provider. And CrowdStrike, by the way, the 5 billion that was a mistake someone did, by the way. Now, if someone does this intentionally, suppose I am a disgruntled employee, this was a mistake someone did and it got the entire world to stand still, right? Everywhere the flights were cancelled, people could not, work, desktops were locked out and so on. And that was a mistake. Now, if I'm a disgruntled employee or if I have access and I really need to do something, right? We talk about terrorism. This could be a terrorism that someone can do to, take revenge. So again, what I'm trying to say, how does it impact you? Again, if you are on the board, think about this, does the company have backup procedures? Do they have a backup continuity plan if anything like that happens? So that is primarily what we are talking about, the digital concentration risk here. And the last area is AI and Gen AI. Like I said, the amount of fraud that we expect is going to increase. Fraudsters are using this quite a bit, right? Gone are the days where we used to get emails on our personal mailbox saying that you have won a lottery, and those were with grammatical errors and so on. Now fraudsters are using Gen AI to create that perfect email, and forget the emails, right? Now they are using generative AI to actually create content that it looks absolutely 100% authentic, right? If I show you, and everyone I would have seen, right? You can't make out. We just did an investigation. This was an American company having subsidiary in the Philippines. And the company lost $9.2 million, where the finance director transferred $9.2 million over 16 transactions over 2 months to these scammers. And the finance director did not know that the person was getting scammed, because the finance director said that we were on a Zoom call and my boss, who was a CFO, I saw the person. So it was a generative AI and there was law firm involved and so on. In the hindsight, you can say that the person was stupid, but the way it was created, we don't blame it. And then when we do a research, if you look up, February 2024, exact same thing happened in Hong Kong, where one of the companies lost $25 million, where it was the first time where a video was used. Earlier it was, we get SMSs, click on this link, and then you get hacked and so on. But it was the first time where a video call was used to defraud someone, and that person said, I had my boss. He was telling me to make the payment. Now, how do I say no there? And then we saw this exactly in the Philippines matter, where we went back and saw there was a Zoom call. In the Zoom call, there was someone with the name of the CFO, with the picture of the CFO sitting together in a larger room. So it was not zoomed in. So it was like a room, a conference room where 10 people are sitting. It sounded like the CFO to the person who is getting instruction. Everything was done in a hurry. So we need to close the deal, so you need to create this. And the unique thing about this was the fraudster, the CFO said there is money lying in one of the bank account, JP Morgan account in the Philippines. The scammers knew the account number, and they said that why don't you make the payment from that account? So they are going and doing social engineering to the extent where they know exactly which bank accounts you have, which account has balances. They know exactly how the CFO or how your bosses react to, what is the tone that they use in such cases. So it's very, very difficult. So going forward, how do you have systems and controls and payments to prevent this? I don't have an answer, but again, it is going to increase, and it's quite worrying in terms of what we are going to see in the future. So impact of generative AI, I think so, is going to be far more than what we all imagine. While it's going to help us, but there are a lot of, from a risk compliance perspective, there are a lot of things to think about. Yeah, so these are okay. So that's it, I think so, in terms of how 2025 looks to us. I think so, couple of areas which will continue to attract global attention. Like I said, cyber, AML, sanctions will continue to attract global attention. At least, and then we'll probably hear about some of the changes that has happened in Malaysia as well. But for someone like you on the board, it's all about being aware, I think, in terms of what is happening. It's also about thinking about whether your internal governance compliance teams have the insights, have the to think about the future, rather than, a lot of times we have seen that the internal teams are just playing catch up. I don't think so that is something which can help. I think so playing catch up is one, but at the same time, internal teams, whoever is your enterprise risk management team, or the internal audit team, or the compliance team, or the governance team, whichever teams that are managing risk in your respective organization, do they have the foresight and they are actually looking at more areas to come rather than playing catch up? With this, let me invite my panelists for the second session, where we'll talk about more in specific about what's happening locally and so on. Please welcome Christina. Nisa can do the honors. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Saket, for your very insightful session. So, we are now moving on the most anticipated part of the program, the panel discussion. I truly believe there is much more to offer in our next panel discussion, where we will dive deeper into the trends and strategies in governance for 2024 and beyond. For that, we are privileged to present our prestigious lineup of seasoned panelists: Christina Fu, ICDM faculty and independent non-executive director at Touch and Go; Richard Ong, Group Head of Group Risk and Compliance. Group Risk and Compliance at Sam Darby Burhard. And last but not least, Lillian Wong, partner at Sharon Dillamore. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists, Richard, Christina, and Lillian, and also Saket.
Okay, brilliant. So like I said, we have a fantastic panel, and we just start, but it will be helpful just to understand from each one of you, in your respective roles, what is that you do, and more in terms of how do you address risk governance, compliance. Let's start with Christina.
I shouldn't have grabbed the mic first. But anyway, thank you, Saket. Not Sakit, huh? Yeah. Saket. Yes, I sit on the board of UEM Sunrise. I'm an audit chair, as well as I'm also on the board governance and risk committee. I also sit on Touch and Go, as you mentioned. I just recently joined, and I sit also on the the board audit and compliance, governance compliance committee. I also sit on the, NCOM NILACs, where I'm also the AC chair, as well as a member of the governance and risk management committee. And then I also chair the what we call board audit and risk management committee at MTDC, Malaysia Technology Development Corporation. In all this, it seems very onerous, right? It's all risk and audit. And in some, like in one, it's combined, but the rest are all separated. So I've had, it's been through the years, and the recent ones too, I've seen, growing responsibility for these committees. And I think, it's, like I said, my first word was onerous, one has to be ever so watchful about looking out for what are the evolving threats and what are the risks. So I think I'll stop here for now, Sake. Okay.
No, thank you. Bottom line is Christina does quite a bit. No, but when I was actually creating the panel, I think, and I'm very privileged to have 3 stalwarts here and 3 from very different things that they do on a daily basis. So hopefully, all the questions should be to them, not to me. So, but please challenge them in terms of their activities. But Richard, why don't you just introduce in terms of what you do on a daily basis?
All right. Good morning, everyone. I present to the board every quarter, and I have 12 board members. But today, I have in a room 100 board members, so this is the most tense moment in my career, honestly. But okay, jokes aside, I'm Richard, and I lead the group risk and compliance function of Sime Darby Berhad. I think there's a lot of misconception as to what is Sime Darby, right? Because Sime Darby today is not the Sime Darby that you used to know previously, the big conglomerate that we used to be. In 2017, Sime Darby has demerged. So in a way, Sime Darby Plantation, which is now known as SD Guthrie, and Sime Darby Property have been, in a way, went on their own now. So what's left in the business now, it's more of we sell cars, motors, we do industrial equipments like Caterpillar equipments. We used to have hospitals, which we divested last year. And we just recently acquired UMW. Yeah, so that makes us the biggest automotive player in Malaysia at the moment. So my role is pretty much doing 2 big pillars of risk and compliance. Risk, primarily enterprise risk management, ensuring that we set the culture of risk centricity across the business, as well as looking at investment risks, business continuity management, and the compliance side of things. It's about looking at anti-bribery, anti-corruption, and the more systemic compliance risk areas like competition law, data privacy, and so on. Yeah, so that's about me.
Again, I think so. Bottom line is you also do quite a bit. Okay, so let's see if Lillian does quite a bit.
I'm Lillian, a partner in Chandelamore, so I'm a dispute lawyer. The reason why I'm the last also, I'm probably the last person you want to see. Normally the board would like to avoid, right, and say, never mind, let the legal handle it, let the compliance handle it, until it's really, really serious, then you say, okay, now you sit in the board and explain the matters, how serious it is. So profession, I do a lot of dispute matters and regulatory compliance. If you're not familiar with Chandelamore, we are apparently, based on the latest statistic, we are the biggest in Malaysia, more than 120 lawyers. And coincidentally, we are also celebrating our 120th anniversary next year. So last year we did a 118, a big party for a lot of our clients and companies. And hopefully next year we get to do another 120th anniversary. Yes, so...
so next year, drinks on you.
Yes, happy to. Oh, it's my first time to the ICDM. I mean, again, that maybe explains the reason why normally directors would like to avoid lawyers.
Okay, now let's get into some serious stuff now. So coming to, like I said, Malaysia in specific, right? I know in the in 2024, there has been some changes that has happened in Malaysia. Generally, I think so in overall governance standards, I think so. some steps have been taken by the government, by the regulator to increase the governance standards, right? Be it in terms of introducing changes to the PDPA. There is something that came in on privacy. What I want to know, like I discuss global trends. If I have to ask you, and I'll probably start with Lillian here, what are some of the 3 trends that you saw for Malaysian companies in terms of 3 critical areas in 2024 when it came to areas that kept you and your team busy, and some changes that you have seen which has taken place already?
Cyber threats, I would say. Sakit has earlier, Sakit, I must now make it very clear, it's not Sakit. Sakit, I think I started out by saying, even globally, a lot of cyber crimes. And in Malaysia, we actually handle a lot more matters. Let's just take 2024 this year. Cyber threats, but I would divide it into 3 key areas. They are all cyber related. First, data breaches. Big or small entities, data breaches and risks, I would say, of cyber attacks are very real. A lot of companies, they are MNC, they have very, very good IT service, IT technologies and cybersecurity system, yet still suffer from data breaches incident. Previously, in the past, a lot of data breaches incident happened. Lawyers get involved, we help the client resolve the issues, then you move on. But this year, because of the amendment in the Personal Data Protection Act, making it mandatory for companies to report data breaches to the regulators. So that actually is really a game changer for entities. The guidelines is not in place yet, but the idea is that it's mandatory. There are certain criteria. So then they say you must mandatorily report data breaches within 72 hours. If it's of significant scale or harm, so it's not like, if it's one data breach, one individual, then you must report. So there are a lot of conditions. Those guidelines have not been finalized yet, but the act has already been passed. The bill has been passed in July. So mandatory reporting. What it means is that there will be an increased enforcement risk. Because traditionally, you are not required to report. Data breaches, maybe you sort it out, you sue your contractors, and then that's it. But now, in addition to that, you have to report to the enforcement. The regulator might come after the entity. Second, I would say it's cyber defamation. So defamation, many years ago, 30 years ago, we only see it on papers. These days, I think, and in fact, this year, I think is a very busy year for defamation cases because it's so easy for anyone to defame anyone or to be defamed. So when we act for the companies will say, hey, I don't like this post. Why is this person complaining about my entities? Or directors. We act for directors when there are negative posts on Facebook, on social media, on Instagram. So we have to react very quickly on that. So that's cyber defamation now. It's just so common. Third is cyber fraud. I think I want to mention a little bit more. Maybe, and actually at least 1 or 2 cases, and in fact also this year, is a lot of investment, cyber cryptocurrency, and also just investment agreements, not necessarily must be cyber related, but because of information, that is so common now. There's this saying, data is the new oil. Data, it's everywhere. Everyone has data, every company has data, and you can make a lot of the data. So, but with that, from legal perspective, actually it creates a lot more dispute and risk for entity.
So, coming to Richard, you talked about Siam Dhabi as an organization, multi-jurisdictions, 18 different countries you operate in. What is that you have seen in 2024, and specifically anything in Malaysia being headquartered here?
I think if you look at it from an outside-in perspective, starting from the macro layer, and I think the geopolitical undercurrents that you've just shown just now has, in a way, massively impacted the Siam Dhabi business. Although we are a Malaysian entity, but we are represented in 17 different countries, so that makes us sort of like a Malaysian MNC in a way. So when the Russia-Ukraine war happened, when the Israeli-Palestinian war happened, that has in a way massively impacted the supply chain. Yeah. And when the Houthi rebels attacked the Straits of Hormuz, we had to divert the whole routing of the shipping of our cars and our parts. And that has, in a way, extended the lead time by 10 days. And that's a lot of impact, actually, for a business like us. So the geopolitical landscape will continue to affect us moving forward, and that's always been the case for a business like us. Now, if you move one layer down to the industry level, and that's where you can see now with ESG and all this green push, it's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing for the better of the future. But in a way, you will see in this transitional phase, there's a lot of disruptive elements. Disruptive factors that will, in a way, change the way how we do our business. For example, electrification. Yeah, it's now something very common now in Malaysia. Yeah, but 5 years ago we were all so worried how that would impact the business. Yeah, anyway, that has impacted our business because now we have no choice but to start selling electric vehicles. Yeah, and in a way, Malaysia is quite late in the game because China is so far ahead in terms of EVs. So when the geopolitical events happen, and that's where China dumped their vehicles in Southeast Asia. So that has also created a new type of competition which we've never seen before in Malaysia, for example. So if you walk into a showroom now, you can get massive discounts if you want to buy a fuel car, yeah, as compared to EVs. So that has changed the landscape. And in a way also, I'm not sure if you've heard of a new way of selling cars, which is called the agency sales model. So you no longer have dealerships, it's like this intermediation of dealerships. Mercedes is doing that in Malaysia, yeah. BMW, not yet, but most automotive makers are already in that mode. So that is also in a way disruptive because traditional dealers like us, we will probably be out of the business. Yeah, in the long run. Now, if you move one layer down to the internal level, that's where you talk about people, process, culture, and system, right? So that has also changed a lot. And because of the first two layers, the way we do business now is so much different from before, right? And just very simple, let's talk about ESG. You have IFRS S1, S2 reporting requirements. You have to disclose your emissions. So we have been living with like one single accounting system for the longest time. So moving forward, you have two. One for your financial accounts, another one for your emissions. That's going to be the new norm moving forward. Yeah. So as a business, I think from that three layers, that is what I see. That has changed a lot in the last 12 months.
Thank you. And Christina, coming to you, right? We heard that you obviously sit in number of companies, the boards of number of companies. What is your thinking when you see corporate governance in Malaysia? How it has changed over a period of time? It's more recently in the last couple of years. And in specific, anything notable that you would like to highlight which happened in 2024 from overall corporate governance standards in Malaysia?
Saket, I think in what I'm going to say is about corporate governance because as a director, that's what you have to ensure, that proper corporate governance is in place and the framework is in place. But just from what the two of them have mentioned, Lillian and Richard have mentioned about the experiences that they've got and the issues, the challenges they're facing. I mean, at the board level, we also have an issue because we need to make sure that there's no greenwashing. I mean, you mentioned earlier. We have to make sure that the information that we put out there to stakeholders, to shareholders, are accurate. Now, one of the biggest challenge we have is actually finding talent, getting the right people to come on board and help us prepare or extract and prepare the information that's required for reporting, for compliance. Because if we don't do it accurately, we don't do it correctly, then fines come back, and we end up at the board level being responsible for that. So in terms of corporate governance, that's it, more responsibility on all of us here who are, corporate directors. it makes you think, what else should we be doing? Because you have to be on guard all the time. And given the increasing requirements and regulatory requirements and compliance, it's just no end to it. It just keeps, there's added responsibility. You have to keep up to date. You have to be able to ask management the right questions, in terms of compliance to the standards, reporting standards, listing requirements, and regulatory requirements. So, daunting.
Yeah. No, it is daunting and it's challenging for everyone sitting in this room in terms of one is being aware of what are the changes that happens, and obviously forums like ICDM helps everyone. So being aware, and then once you are aware, how do you actually translate? Because a lot of times I've seen companies also, there's some sort of pushback in terms of how much can the companies do as well. So
Yeah.
again, expectations of board versus what the management might be sometimes different.
Yes, but it's finding the right talent to come into your organization to help you do the reporting. That, I don't know. I mean, how many people here have that issue? You have?
Yes.
Okay. Very few hands? Oh, well, a few no, though. Yeah, okay. But I think that's a real problem, trying to get qualified and experienced people. There are very few experienced ones, but certified, qualified. So that is an area of great demand.
There's a point of view, ma'am. Can I get your name and your question, please?
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Becky, formerly from Huawei, Facebook, and TikTok. Yeah, these are the companies that we had gone through, and a lot of sanctions, and also some of the sanctions being resolved, but still got another set of new sanctions coming in. Well, being a person that in the top management handling the HR matters, so I agree with Christina. Finding the right talents during the most critical time to answer all those questions, compliance questions, is the most important. And also that internally, that in all these kind of like international companies, when we face all the sanctions, the most important is the change management and communication. So as a HR person, what we need to do is really come up with our set of communications to our internal employees. We don't want to lose any talents during the sanctions process time. So we have to align all the communications across all countries to be the same. And secondly, we also have to identify who are the talents with the very good communication skill set. Because there are a lot of questions coming in all different departments, and as a head of all different departments, you are responsible to give all the right answers back to the board, so that the board can answer to the authorities. And then the last skill set that you need to have is the analytical skill. Each of the questions, answers that are given, you have to internally really analyze it. Will it be able to let other parties to catch more loopholes? Or is it analytical enough that you do not create more questions from the senators? Yeah. So yeah, this is all that I have. I agree with you, Christina. Thank you.
Yes.
Kapna Sopasundram. I also sit as an independent non-exec director. But I have this issue, and I'm also struggling, where you have, when you say board have the oversight, it's no longer oversight. Because again, you have a management talent issue, and it's difficult to get a talent, and then you do not get the right reports from the management. How do we definitely dive in? You need to look into it more because it's our responsibility as well. So when they say oversight, we also have to hold hand. I find that, you have to hold hand with the management where they are struggling as well. At the end of the day, it's company and the directors as well. But of course, you do your non-independent executive role as well. But again, we have issue with the talent as well. And it's so difficult because they come in and then they leave. They're being sort of like robbed by other companies as well. So Yeah.
And to follow up on that, sorry, if
Yeah.
I could, if I may, Saket, you know, I mean, having the right talent not just at management level, but actually at the board level, right? Amongst us to make sure that there is somebody who is a little bit more knowledgeable, or amongst us all, that we all have to keep up to date with what is happening out there. Now that I said, it is onerous. Not all of us may be, you know, in tune with what's happening, but we have to, because it is our duty, right? So that's a big challenge, yeah.
And this is not, Kalpana, like what you mentioned. I think so. This is not, again, something specific in Malaysia. Wherever in Southeast Asia I go, when I talk to directors, they face this challenge that how much I should be involved in the company. Should I just rely on what is being presented, or should I get more intrusive? Will my role change? Can I? So again, but the general thing that I'm seeing across directors in Southeast Asia is their involvement is increasing more and more in the affairs of the company. They want to understand a little bit more about, rather than just being presented the board minutes or the board deck. They are actually getting more hands-on. And again, everyone has limitations in terms of being a non-exec independent directors, how much you can get access to. It might not be applicable to most of you here, but we end up doing a lot of work for investors who invest into companies and startups and so on, right? When as investors, sometimes you have board seats, but even if you have board seats, a lot of times why the startup world is slightly more dicey, I would say, because a lot of times you see that more number of issues coming out from the startup world, right? So what we do sometimes with those such investors is we try to give them information on an ongoing basis from the outside world, right? Where on an ongoing basis we capture intelligence on the companies they have invested to just find out if the company is doing okay or not, if there are issues which are emerging but not being disclosed to the board or the investors, numbers, for example, which has been. So I've seen that not necessarily in matured corporates like Sime Darby, for example, in this case, but more in terms of the startup ecosystem who's chasing revenue, chasing targets, and so on. So that sort of outside in information that, getting information, but that information is presented only to the board.
But Saket, I beg to differ. I think, any boards, not just startup, but any boards would need expert from time to time. And in an area where you do not have the expertise within, it is for the board members, and it is a right of the board member to actually request for professional help, and the company has to pay for it. So I'm helping you do a commercial.
No, absolutely. I will rephrase what Christina said. Every board needs crow, you meant. But thank you for doing this. Yeah. This was planted. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Saket and honorable panelists. My name is Chin. Just one question. Please share briefly the systems and control to minimize dark side of AI, more than being aware, but to have the foresight in a reasonable manner instead of to react. Malaysia in specific.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Systems and control to minimize dark side of AI.
Oh, systems and controls to minimize dark side of AI. Again, like I said, AI in itself is an emerging world. So every time we have seen new technologies coming in to find out whether something is a AI or a actual piece what you are seeing, it gets changed. One of the things that they are now talking about, for example, if you create a image, for example, from ChatGPT, they are talking about how that image will have a watermark. So everything which will be AI generated, they're talking about it, is still not in the works. But one of the things to distinguish between a actual and will have a permanent watermark established. So at least that could be one. So again, it's more to do with, I would say, the companies who are having these tools to generate the AI. They are the ones also who are also working on having the right mechanism and controls to prevent the misuse of AI. There are tools, like I said, which helps you distinguish between what is a AI generated content vis-a-vis an actual content. But like I said, as things progress, that also distinction might go away. It will be very difficult for anyone to identify. I know that, banks, for example, financial services do eKYC, right? Where they say that you hold a paper with something written and they do a live. Now, that has failed because now the new tools which come up is as accurate that, it can actually generate a fake AI and it can do a fake eKYC. So again, financial institutions who use the fintech banks, the digital banks, now they are rethinking in terms of what next needs to be done. So I don't have a full answer to that, but it is an area which is changing, and I think so there are some comments there.
Hi, yeah, I just want to ask a very quick question. So I sit on the board of an online broker. It's like third largest in the world in Malaysia. Obviously, everything technical is very scary. I'm also advisor of FinTech Association of Malaysia, so it's quite intense. So we're talking about risk. We all understand the risk. It's all very scary, but risk mitigation vis-a-vis processes and stuff like that is one thing. What about insurance? Is there insurance against AI?
Maybe I just give, maybe I'll just add on to answer both questions based on from the legal and compliance perspective, because this is one question that we get a lot. So first question to ask your organization is, are you using AI first? And if so, what are the tools that you are using? Are you talking about those tools that you are entering into contract with, say, for example, Copilot? You sign a contract with Microsoft and you're using it, it's integrated with your system, or are you talking about your ChatGPT or Google AI assistant that any of your, even your management or your employees could just go and generate a board report and then submit to you? That goes back to your talent questions. Can you now identify whether this report is generated by ChatGPT because you give them 10 hours, say tomorrow I need to present to the board. So I don't care, you're going to come up with a report. But if a lot of senior people, can they tell the difference if this is AI generated or not? You can't tell. Then you also cannot verify it. So risk, yes. So now coming back to system and control, my first question is, you don't use your ChatGPT, right? Can you use ChatGPT? Because lately a lawyer just told me that, actually, when he used ChatGPT to find out certain general information, he actually found some information of client that he don't think should be there. God knows who uploaded it. That is a real risk because you can find anything on, it's generative, it's machine learning. Everything that you put on it, it comes out. So if you are using ChatGPT general free, no, very, very bad when it comes to risk, yeah? So system and control, go to your contracts. Make sure you have all those terms, your legal and your compliance are checking them if you are going to use a real AI. Insurance, I think because I mentioned cyber threats, I think insurance, no one can escape that. It's very important. First thing when data breaches incident happen, we'll ask client, insurance, do you have it? And I think a lot of clients or companies, they are increasing their insurance coverage to accidents, human errors, cyber attack. Cyber attack is very real. But what about human, your disgruntled employee? We have done many cases. One disgruntled employee just created a new Insta account 6 p.m. and uploaded your internal WhatsApp communication between the management, your CEO, CFO, and then client call and say, hey, can you get it removed? So then we have to go to the social media platform to ask them to remove. So that is actually real. So internal system and control, we actually help the clients to prepare a lot of policies on governing your employees and your staff from using your AI. Tell them either no, or if you want to use, how you're going to use it.
Sorry if I may add to Lilian. I think you talk about system and controls. Let's go to the basics first. I think the most basic is to set the tone, right? And that's where you probably need to have a policy. How do you use AI? It means, like, for example, what Lilian mentioned, you can't use ChatGPT, you can use Copilot, right, for example. And also, like you cannot rely on on AI to make important decisions like investment decisions. So you've set policies like that so that in a way ring fences the risk. And I guess the second thing about insurance, right? I guess even with cyber insurance now, I don't think cyber insurance will cover AI. Even social engineering, for that matter, they are very calculated risks. I think they only cover first and third party for now. I'm not sure whether the insurers have an appetite to cover AI because it's so uncertain, right? Something we have to see moving forward.
Morning. I'm Paul, also independent directors. I think I'd just like to share my thoughts and also add on to what Christina have just mentioned. In the light of the ever-changing changes or all these new frontiers of risk that we have seen that's coming on board, and as board of directors, especially as independent board of directors, besides being ourselves being increasing our skill set in these areas, and also making sure that the management have the right talents. And I think the other thing that is more important also is to, as directors, we should also try to sort of in this trying time, to try to inculcate a better culture beside the systems and the rules and regulations. I think example is like these new areas of topics or discussions. Typically for board meetings, the agenda of the days are usually the most important business agenda example. So perhaps at certain times, at certain points of the year, there needs to be the agenda, the pecking order of the agenda. Some of these areas need to be discussed in a much more detail and give much more emphasis. That's sort of setting the tone, setting the culture change. And also, as perhaps if we are sitting on the board committees of the governance, risk, compliance, and things like that, our reports to the whole board, our reports as setting the tone for the whole board should be much more in depth and say that look, this is what happens, and these are things that we got to take note of, and this is a trend forward. Our interaction with the management talents. Most of the time, management will come to the board and say that, oh, we have to present to the board. We're not sure that they understand or not, and they'll probably have less questions and things like that. I think for long-term sustainability, you need really for the board members, especially independent board members, especially those who are in charge of governance, risk, and compliance, to engage very strongly and interact with the management talent that is involved. Especially, let's just say a young guy who is very passionate about ESG, and he's in charge of the head of ESG in the company. If he's not given the guidance, if he does not see these senior board members as somebody he can actually interact and work closely with, he may lose the motivation and he may lose the guidance and the foresight of what he's supposed to do. He doesn't know what he's supposed to do. But if the board member now, with all these new changes, we used to say that as board member, we shouldn't step into the kitchen. We shouldn't do what the management should do. But I think in this trying time, in these new areas now, it should be more of a partnership. You should interact more with them, learn with them, work with them, attend all the ESG events, ESG activities, attend seminars with them, and you discuss with them off the board meeting, off the board committee meeting. That's what I thought, the culture part. Thank you.
No, thank you. Culture is very important, and not going to the kitchen is also important. But eating on the dining table is required. But thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Sue Choi, and my background is in digital strategy in financial institutions, especially insurance. So I just want to quickly touch on the points that came up on insurance. So first of all, on the AI part, I agree with Lillian, but I think in terms of AI, there is the mastering, even though you might outsource a lot of things to AI, which I think we all do, there's the human oversight element that needs to come in. So you can't completely, as long as you still use AI, but you still need to make sure that there's a human verifying all the facts. And that's an important aspect of the ethics and governance part of AI. On the insurance part, I think if you look at the insurance policies, they're a bit silent, especially on business interruption due to AIs. And so, but right now with so that means it's still covered unless it's specifically excluded. But moving forward, I think with a lot more emphasis on cyber insurance, then there will be, of course, insurance doesn't want to cover any, intentional fraud or malicious intent and as long as that's negligence, gross negligence, has caused, as long as it's reasonable, then I believe that insurance will kick in. But to your point, there should be a lot more that insurance needs to cover in the future, and that's a gap that that's being recognized. Now, if you don't mind, I want to pivot a little bit to a different question, because if I look at the ASEAN corporate governance across, there's an association that does the Watch report this year, and I saw that Malaysia is number 5 on corporate governance, so that's really pretty good, not too bad in the middle of the tier. And one of the things that's said is that, look, the Securities Commission is really pushing very hard on setting the high bar on corporate governance, but enforcement is still a challenge. So I would like to understand from the panelists, like, what kind of measures could we take in Malaysia to kind of improve that aspect without stifling market growth? Yeah, thank you.
Any of you?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again? How to improve corporate governance, right?
I think the question is that there's a lot of things done on corporate governance, but enforcement is still low in Malaysia.
Yes, as far as the association is concerned, when they are pegging where Malaysia stands in terms of corporate governance compared to the other markets, like I think Japan is number 1, Korea is number 2, Taiwan number 3, number 4 Singapore, and then number 5 is Malaysia. So it's pretty stable. We have Malaysia has very, very high scores in terms of regulatory push, in terms of a lot of things that the regulator is doing, but they still claim that enforcement is weak. So I know that there's a lot of concern from board directors to make sure that reporting is all that, but as far as the watchdog is concerned, Malaysia still lacks, enforcement. So you set a high bar, but then you don't enforce. So it still comes back that that's still seen as not good enough. Yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to know, how can we balance that? Yeah.
Yes,
aspect.
this is also one of the very common questions that we get, because every time when we are asked to advise risk, the next question is, what is the enforcement risk? Then they ask you to put red, yellow, green. How high is it? Then they will further ask you, so how many cases do we have in respect of this alleged non-compliance? And you are right. I think she is absolutely right. So a lot of areas of law, so for example, when corporate liability for anti-corruption came into place, a lot of entities and directors are very, very nervous, because directors can be personally liable. How many years down the road now? Yeah, 4 years down the road. We had one case. So every time when the client asks us, so is there a risk? Of course there is a risk. Non-compliant is a risk. But yes, enforcement, our government, they have not been very active in, or in fact, I would say, they targeted certain organization. That is reality. Then the next question is, are they going to be more aggressive, is what we are getting. So this comes to the trend, right? This year, if you are following laws, I actually feel that they are doing so much, but entire year, if I were to sum up, they revamp all the cyber laws. Just like before, they revamp the laws, after that, silence. So you do all your compliance program, after that, silence. No choice, you are MNC, right? In your companies, you have to do all your gap analysis, compliance program. But then in reality is that you never know when they'll come after you, especially the Anti-Corruption Commission. One day they knock at your door, sometimes not because of the organization, it's your director. Suddenly they feel that, oh, I'm hearing something juicy about the director, I'm now going to go after this director. Then they will issue a notice and ask for information about the directors, want everything about the company. Then coming back to the first question that everyone started with, management training. Another issue that I face when I work with companies and directors is your old board and your new board. Old board one day will say, I want to enter into this contract, multi-million, I don't care. Your sign this deal, seal the deal so that tomorrow we can go to the signing ceremony. Next year, suddenly, new board come in and say, I want to terminate this contract. Then we have to check, do you have termination clause or not? How do you terminate? Then we have to give them the option. If you terminate, you pay X. If you don't terminate, you pay Y. So this is another real issues that we have been facing from time to time. So due diligence and the analytical skill is actually very important.
I think to add to Lilian, I think the government itself, you look at the government of Malaysia, right? They are increasingly becoming more stringent in terms of enforcement. And in terms of anti-bribery, for example, I mean, I've just attended a MACC talk some time ago, right? And apparently, they're going to come up with a new law, a new rule, that if you're going to bid for government contracts above 10 million, you have to have ABMS certified. Your anti-bribery management systems must be certified. So that's one form of enforcement, and I see that as a good start for Malaysia. And even like what Lilian mentioned earlier, data privacy, for example, PDPA is going to be more and more aligned to the gold standard of GDPR. Yeah, and even competition law, the merger control regime is also coming into force. So I think Malaysia has to catch up because we can't be too far behind in terms of enforcement. So when all other countries are moving towards the direction, I think the government has no choice but to also put more stringent into that aspect. Yeah.
The other thing that I want to mention is that lately they amended a law act to give them more enforcement power, especially when it comes to social media. So last 2 weeks ago, 6th of December, they just amended the Communication and Multimedia Act. Traditionally, everyone would say, oh, I'm not a licensee under MCMC, so I don't need to look under the Act. But now they amended to give more powers to MCMC to audit your network system, to now say that, hey, if I feel that your network system is unsafe, I can go to any company now to audit. So first thing is, I think they have to make sure they have the enforcement right first. Then they will now come after. And of course, the very controversial online safety bill that got passed last week. Of course, that affects most the social media operators like TikToks, Facebook, and all, because then they say, hey, I actually feel that they feel like the regulators have no power to oversee all these foreign entities, X, Facebook, TikTok, that don't have a license. So first thing is they say now compulsory you get a license. Then after that, not just entity, I don't think it will affect just entity, it will, first regulator of course, because regulator can now issue takedown notice. Vis-a-vis companies, last time when we have to write for a client to tell Facebook or social media platform to remove, their HQ is in Ireland, US. It takes forever. Of course, you can report. But now I think there'll be a game changer next year. Things will move a lot more faster, and that's how they enforce it. Because once operators are licensees in Malaysia, we too also then write to the local officers to help our clients and the directors to remove all those unnecessary or negative remarks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Just moving forward, just to remind the panelists that we have our own set of questions to discuss as well.
Oh, we do?
In case everyone forgot. There's one more, yes. A short one, please. Yes.
Yeah, hi. My name is Lily. Thank you for to the panel members for your thought-provoking sharing session so far. I have a question in regards to supply chain, and we talk about ESG generally. So, in many of our organizations now, like it or not, we will have to manage some of these sanctions that arose from human rights activities. Take, for example, you have the EU Sustainability Due Diligence Directive that came about. So in your experience, how do you prep up your organization, and especially as a board of directors, to make sure you will do right from a ESG human right perspective? Because I find that's very challenging, and in many of our boards, that's one area where we don't really focus on. So I would like to hear your ideas.
Okay. Thank you for that question. Let me just make that question slightly more broader, and including ma'am's question as well. So we all heard about changing landscape, right? The geopolitical landscape in the last year. We talked about cyber, we talked about Gen AI, sanctions, right? ESG she talked about. If each of you can give one example of any of these, right, and especially one example from ESG, if anyone can take, what did you exactly do in your organization, right? How did you address that particular risk? What did you do differently in your organization? That would be helpful for our audience. I know, and especially Lillian, from your perspective also, because there is more geopolitical risk, I'm sure there are more disputes, litigation, third-party funding would have been introduced. So we'd like at least to hear from you that aspect, but at least from Richard and Christina, in terms of that one example, and especially on ESG, supply chain.
I'll give an example of how this is a real case example for Sime Darby, and we have about 15,000 vendors globally. That's crazy. And I happen to be the Secretariat of the Procurement Leadership Council, which is chaired by the GCFO. So when it comes to enforcing compliance into procurement, that's what I have to do. So now out of the 15,000 vendors, and when we have new vendors, when we onboard a new vendor, we have a KYC process, a due diligence process to ensure that we are really onboarding the right vendor that is free from breaches of corruption, breaches of anti-bribery, anti-corruption, breaches of ESG matters. And so happened when we onboarded one vendor in Malaysia, it's just a very small vendor, and you wouldn't even expect that this small vendor would have any association with the Russian oligarchs in Russia. And so happened when we did the KYC, it turned out, yes, this one of the shareholders is a relative of a Russian oligarch which has been sanctioned by US, right? So, I mean, no one expected that. I mean, the procurement guys were ready to onboard the vendor before we found out, oh, damn, this is not going to do well for us from a reputation perspective. So we had to cancel the vendor, right, just because of that. So I guess it's difficult to, I mean, in terms of enforcement, it's going to be very difficult because you, especially for companies that have a big population of vendors, it's not easy. But what certain organizations do is that you have to tier your vendor appropriately, and that's where you have to have also a vendor risk management or a third-party risk management framework in place to sort of tier your vendors into what is a high, medium, or low-risk vendor. And the high-risk vendors are the ones that you have to, from time to time, do scans and due diligence to make sure that they are really not prosecuted for any offenses. Yeah. That's more from a supply chain perspective.
And just before we come to Christina, quick show of hands in your respective companies, if you're aware, how many actually have a third-party risk management program where you screen your vendors, rate your vendors depending on, like Richard said, level of high risk, medium. How many of you actually do this on a proper framework perspective? Yeah, because thank you. Because that is, I think, again, one of the key things, be it on the sanction program, be it on the FCPA or the bribery and corruption programs, which is a requirement that companies needs to screen your third parties, and especially from the ESG perspective as well. So again, it would be good for everyone here to ask that question to your procurement team or your compliance team, that what sort of third-party program that your company runs, and is it just something which is done ad hoc, or there is a formal process behind, or just ask that question. Once you ask, you will get the answers. If you have not, so it's called the third-party risk management program. Just ask that question.
Saket, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I don't have anything quite as dramatic as Richard's example. In fact, I think generally we've implemented whatever assessment in the various companies, and generally all ticked off. There hasn't been anything dramatic, so I'm sorry, I don't have anything to share in particular there. That's good news, right? Oh, phew.
But you could have used ChatGPT to get an example.
It might be hallucinating,
Lillian, over to you.
Okay, I give one example. This will cover the ESG risks as well as technologies, because I think these two areas, sustainability, climate change, and technologies, are moving so fast. So in my case, it's a dispute. A lot of people don't want it, but it's inevitable because the contracts, the supplier, when you want to close the deal and sign the contract, you give all sorts of warranty representation. So it says my IT technology is the best. This is the state of the art. Everyone loves the word state of the art technology. Looks very good, right? And long-term contract, some 20 plus 20 years, but it's technology. So that at that time, 5 years ago, the IT product can be delivered, turnaround time is say 24 hours. But now, today, or actually just 3 years later, you can do it 3 seconds, one click only. Then suddenly the client say, oh, now I can do it in 3 seconds. Why do I need to be stuck with this technology? I want to terminate the contract. But this is a multi-million or billion contracts. Then, of course, we went into arbitration. We have to fight. So, and then there were some issues about suppliers cannot comply or breaches, data breaches that happen. Then the next question is then, when we look back at the contract, there's actually no termination clause. You are stuck with this 20 years contract, and you have to continue paying on a monthly basis X amount. So the answer to your question is that I think it's inevitable. Supply chain, everyone has to sign some declarations because you want to seal the deal. But the question is, do you actually know what your organization is getting into? You have anti-bribery, anti-slavery, child labor. Malaysia, are we ready for that? When you talk about slavery, we work people 24/7, right? So the question is, can you comply? Can you comply with your EU standard? Can you comply with the GDPR? But your contracts are actually say that I comply with GDPR, I comply with this EU system and standards. If you can't, then there is actually a real litigation risk. Is real because when the dispute arises, then everyone will start looking at the contract. But I think the problem is people only start looking at the contract when dispute arises, right? Then they suddenly decide that, then they'll think out which board of director approved this warranty and representation. Then that's your problem, I think. Solution is that, although I'm dispute lawyer, I don't create dispute. Dispute happens, right? Because of all this, we manage and resolve dispute. So I think perhaps a good system and control is that you want to re-look at it. And I think with this third-party funding, I'm not sure whether you heard about it. Also, one of the bills that this year, I think they passed so many bills, we can't even catch up. So now for arbitration, the law allows for third-party funding. Meaning, so a lot of cases, sometimes clients say, I have no money, right? No funding, so never mind, we let go, we write it off. Now you can actually get a third-party funder to fund litigation. So does that mean that if you are from bigger organization, does that mean SME previously don't have funds to go after Sime Darby? They can now say, don't worry, I've got a third-party funder. I'm going to sue Sime Darby MNC. But vis-a-vis, if you are MNC, does that mean you have a higher litigation risk to look out for? Of course, it also benefits you. Sometimes you don't want to finance your legal costs. You can get a third-party funder to do that.
Okay, conscious of time, let's move forward, right, for the next year, right? What are some of the things that you now see taking shape? We talked about so many of bills, so many of laws being passed in Malaysia. How do you see 2025 shaping up? And again, specifically, if there are one or two areas that the board should be more aware, what would that be from your perspective?
If I may start, I think the ESG requirements, the reporting requirements, that's one. And
so just to ask, so from a reporting, you are saying it will, now that the reporting requirements are coming up, again, what does it mean to people here?
What needs to be built is the competency within the organization to make sure that you can comply with that, because otherwise you risk not complying, right? And then come its problems. So whose problem is it? So really, it's really at the board that you have to make sure management goes out there, recruit the right people, and the submissions are there, and you are questioning management, asking management the right questions to satisfy yourself that and be assured, right? And if necessary, get external assurance, right? To make sure that you are getting and you're reporting and complying as you should. To me, that's one of the bigger ones. There are other areas I'm sure my colleagues here will contribute.
I think what to look out for next year, I think from a geopolitical perspective is definitely, there's a new US president, yes. And there's going to be disruptive policies that's going to be promulgated by this person. And that actually has a chain reaction. It will definitely impact Southeast Asia countries, because the first victim is China. And Malaysia being a big trade partner of China will definitely be impacted. So in the automotive space, for example, that's where my business is. We're already seeing that, like you're seeing the influx of electric vehicles being pushed to the market. You can get a 7-seater SUV or an MPV for just 120,000, or a Chinese EV, versus paying 300,000-400,000 for a Velfire or something more expensive than that, right? So that is definitely going to be a game changer for me. And the second game changer is definitely going to be the green push, which is ESG. Like what I say, that is really going to change the whole way we do business moving forward. And if you remember many years back, when the Enron fiasco, the scandals happened, right? We had Sarbanes-Oxley being promulgated back then. That was also a big game changer. This is probably the second one. You will see IFRS S1, S2 being pushed the capital markets. That will change how companies are being responsible to be transparent in reporting your emissions and stuff. Yeah, and in a way that puts more onus on the board of directors. The directors there's more responsibility on your shoulder to ensure that there's transparency and the numbers are accurate. So for me, yeah, these are the two big things that's going to happen. Yeah.
I'll just add on maybe two areas. One is that's certainly going to be a game changer, although not this year, on merger and acquisition matters. So if you have pending transaction, you want to enter into a joint venture, purchasing, selling assets, the thought, or we have been told by the Competition Commission very regularly, that they are actually really going to amend to introduce the merger control regime, suggesting that once the act is passed, you have to get clearance for transaction. Of course, there is a certain threshold. Now we don't know what's the threshold yet, but if we look at other example, say for the aviation industry, they say it's 50 million. So big M&A matters, look out for. The other thing I think I just want to add on from what Richard has said, actually I really do feel it's not easy to sit on the board, as if you all don't have enough. Like you already have your corporate liability, and now with the data breaches thing, sometimes it's not just a company, their liability is always extended to directors. They will always say, oh, any person can be charged, and it will be the CEO, CFO, directors, managerial level, unless you show that, oh, you really has nothing to do with this. So unfortunately, the reality is that you can no longer turn a blind eye and say that, actually, yeah, I was in the meeting, but I didn't look at this. I have no idea. I rely on my CEO. Unfortunately, cannot. So yes, a lot of things to look out for.
Thank you. I think so we are out of time, but happy to take one or two questions if there are any, apart from what we have discussed. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Ahad, one of the GLC's finance director. Just to add on something, I hear a lot of good thoughts today. And I'm come from the finance professionals with the IT background. It's a time for us as a directors, right? We must have a good knowledge of IT, cybersecurity part. Especially we must have some representations from IT. And either it is IT knowledgeable persons or cybersecurity background. I give you one typical example that what we have done. CrowdStrike is well known, but Alhamdulillah, our group was not affected because we have a good board of directors and CTO. We decided 5 years ago to not use CrowdStrike because we are based on Microsoft and Oracle. So like what you shared earlier, Mr. Bhatia, that too much concentrations on one IT company is not good as well. We are not against any IT company, but we must protect ourselves from the shareholder perspective and the directors who are making responsibility. I think it's one of my suggestions that we must have representations from the IT background now for the board, and especially with the cyber knowledge, it's important. Thank you.
I think it's a very, very valid point in terms of someone on the board with IT knowledge. I think, thank you, sir. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, so let me come back, just to recap, right? If I can ask, do you think in Malaysia, the board, the directors, have the tools and technology to deal with this changing environment, to change with what is coming up? If not, right, some might have, some might not. But what is that one thing that each of you would recommend, you know, someone taking out from here? What is that one thing you would expect each one to do going forward as a part of their role as a board director? And what does all this mean for everyone sitting in this room, right? We talked about 24, we talked about 24, 25. What does all this mean, and what is that one thing you would like everyone to do, something which they have not been doing?
I'll start first. So maybe just again, this is based on my experience. I think this on the issues of referral. Maybe you want to be a little bit wary of referral. And what I mean is, I just give you lately that one case that I have. So it's on some investment. So of course, investment agreements, or the board would approve it. So an investment portfolio came and said, oh, do you want to invest? Initially, company wanted to invest 10 million. The board thankfully reduced it to 2 million. And then signed the investment agreement. Of course, then it turned out that, sorry, no such thing. and so we are suing and helping the company to recover the money. And then it turned out that it's not just one company, it's many entities. So then, of course, then I started fact gathering, and also I asked, oh, so how did this come about? Because when I look at the investment, that I already know that, you know, they're not talking about some specific products. It's like, you pay me X, I guarantee you Y interest. And so then of course, the question is to say, oh, it's because it's recommended by so-and-so and all these, right, officers and stuff. But sometimes it's actually genuine. So another so-called referrer, or the person that genuinely told you or recommended you about this investment. And in fact, the person actually invested a lot more, 10 times more, but the person becomes one of the claimant as well. So then the question, okay, I think goes back to director having your own minds, right? And your due diligence and your set skill to question. I think the ability to question is very, very good and very, very important. You have to be a little bit more critical. But sometimes, I mean, in reality, we all are in commercial. Sometimes it's difficult, right? Because you might be pressured to pass something because it comes from ABC. So can you say no? Can you not say no? I recognize that's difficult, but at least based on my experience, that's one takeaway that I have.
Well, I'm not a director, but with all due respect to all directors in this room, I would say that it is probably time to embrace new skills and capabilities. It's not so much about the tools, it's more about, you know, there are all these disruptive elements that's happening, right? And these are all the noises like ESG, green push, AI, digital misinformation. These are the things that we have to start understanding the basics and asking the right questions, like what Christina has mentioned, because the board has an important role to play in continuously keep the management in check, a check and balance mechanism. That's very, very important. And I think asking the right questions to the management would be definitely the important aspect moving forward, yeah, with all these risk elements. I think the other thing is also for directors, it's probably also time to look at your personal indemnity, right? Because in my company, we have in a way increased our directors' indemnity amidst all this risk that the board is facing. And in the Sign board, they have a risk not just in Malaysia, but in 17 other countries as well. So we looked into the Directors' Officers Insurance, we increased the coverage, and on top of that, we also given additional indemnity to the directors. So you probably want to request your management to do the same for all of you. Yeah.
Very good advice, Richard. Yeah, I think we all should. There's so many things, but I think fundamental to it, you know, is that instinct, and that's all something that intuition that we all have. Some push it a little bit more, and because of our training, we call it professional skepticism, right? So trust on it. It's too good to be true. It is too good. I mean, put yourself as it is yours. You know, it's a personal investment. If you're making a board decision at the board level, you have to ask the right questions. I think you cannot just pass that responsibility to your fellow board members. If anything at all, later on, if something does go wrong, the minutes of the meeting, which is an important record, will show who asked the questions and who didn't, right? So I think when you take on the board responsibility, a board role, you would have done your duty on the company. Then again, circumstances change, shareholders change, right? and then maybe management also change from time to time. And you have to continually ask yourself, is this the board that I feel comfortable staying on? Right? So professionally, you need to keep protecting yourself, as well as protecting and making sure you're making decisions in the best interest of the company. I think that is easier said than done, but it is so key, because sometimes we just get carried away with, oh, this is a good deal, because you don't forget that there's something called psychology. If management wants you to decide something in their favor, they will push all that information in front of you, or place all that information in front of you, for you to persuade you, isn't it? So you must learn how to question. So trust your instinct and your gut feel. And it's all boils down to integrity at the end of the day, and your own good values, what you stand for. So those are my parting words for now. Thank you.
No, that's great. And if you ask, if I have to summarize in terms of, means to start with sessions like these, means I really appreciate you spending 2 hours towards the end of the year listening about. I think so. The first basic thing is to know what is out there, what might be something which might impact you and your companies. I think so. For me, that's the first thing. Second is my request is, whatever things that you heard in the last 1.5, 2 hours, at least pick up that point and have that discussion. It could be on sanctions, it could be on AML, it could be on third party. Just one question. Ask about in terms of what your company is actually doing to protect the company. Do they have adequate policies, procedures? And again, like Sir said, we don't have to necessarily go inside the kitchen to do that, but you have to get more involved in understanding what the company is doing. I talk about, obviously I come from the investigation background. One of the things that I always recommend to boards are, unfortunately you have to get involved quite a bit more in, especially when there is a matter, right? It could be a investigation matter and so on. You can't just rely on management, because management might have their own intention of things, doing things differently, putting things under the carpet and so on. So, you have to get more involved, ask the right question, whether the scope of the investigation, the coverage of the investigation, the people that you are looking at, the subject of the investigations, are those comprehensive enough? So again, I think so there is some skin in the game that you need to have, especially on any of these compliance and investigation matters. But more importantly, my takeaway or my request is just one point: in your next board meeting, ask for whichever that appeal to you today, that I want to know more about what my company is doing and whether we have an adequate risk management program around those areas. With that, thank you once again. Thank you for sparing time. Thank you for listening to us. And give it for my fantastic panelists. To start with, I think so, let's give it for Lillian, our animated Lillian today. Let's give it for our measured Richard. And for our gracious Christina. Thank you, everyone. Thank you today.
Thank you so much, Saket, Richard, Christina, and Lillian. We hope everyone enjoyed and benefited from this session. Before we end our program, I know we are actually a bit overrun from our initial schedule, but we would appreciate if you could spend about 3 minutes of your time to give us feedback by scanning the QR code on the screen. Certificate of participation will be issued once you have met the requirement as stated in the TNC, like full attendance of the program and upon completion of this feedback form. You can access your EARS certificate from the ICDM Plus portal once you have completed this feedback survey. If you don't have any account yet, please reach out to us for assistance. Okay, while you are doing that, we have an announcement to be made. Do check out our public program for next year, 2025, Beyond Firewalls, a Director's Guide to Cybersecurity in an Uncertain World by Stephen Yates, Director and Global CTO Alumni Services, Singapore, which will be held in person on the 18th February 2025. Okay, I think we have gotten the feedbacks from most of the participants. Thank you to those who have completed the questionnaires. To those who did not manage to complete the questionnaire, we will include the link, and also, we will include the link in our thank you email as well. With that, we have come to the end of the program. Thank you for your attendance and participation. We hope to see you again in our future programs. Thank you so much.